live. Go ahead, right now we're live. Good. Assuming that's you. Okay, great. All right, so going to the book of Ruth, section 4, novellas and wisdom. We're going back, so the book of Ruth is right after the book, but it was written significantly after that. So it's like if the story was written today about the 1600s, right? We see that happening all the time. And so the same thing is happening here. So this is written about 600 to 400 years before the coming of Christ. So what's happening about 600 to 400 BC? What's the main thing happening in Israel between 600 and 400 BC? What is the main historical event happening during that time? You can use the timeline sheet. Feel free to use it. What's happening between 600 and 400 years before the coming of Christ? It's got its own color dedicated to it. Thank you. Yes, the exile. The exile was happening during that time. Okay, maybe we need to go back and just place these with dates as well. Maybe that would be helpful too. Maybe I'll do that tomorrow. Go back ahead of time. All right, so we're about 600 to 400 years before the coming of Christ. That's when this is actually written. They have a people in exile or just coming back from exile, and that's when this story is written. So they're really keep that in mind too as to the story, because that's important for what we take out of the story. It's important. What is this author trying to tell the people of Israel during the time of the exile and perhaps immediately following the exile? So this audience is really a post-exilic audience. Much of Israel's history in the Old Testament was marked with concerns about maintaining the true faith and worship despite the constant presence and influence of pagan cultures. And especially during the time of the exile, intermarriage between Jews and non-believers was discouraged. Why would marriage between Jews and Gentiles be discouraged? Why would marriage between Jews and Gentiles, non-Jews, non-believers, be discouraged? Yes, which means what? What were the Jews trying to avoid? Yes, exactly right. So, if you marry somebody who's not Jewish, the other person probably has their own gods, their own culture that they belong to. And the worry among the Jews was that it would lead to idolatry. And that's not an unfounded thing. That's exactly what happens over and over in the course of history. Solomon, his big demise as a king was that he had a whole bunch of wives. And very few of them were Jewish, and they led him astray. That's why he started following false gods. That's why he started putting up monuments in the high places. Solomon himself did that, because his wives influenced him in that way. And so generally in the course of Jewish history, they discouraged marrying somebody outside of the faith because of that tendency to worship false gods, to fall into idolatry. Something we would see too is a syncretist kind of practice. So syncretism is where you kind of combine the elements of different religions into one, incorporating paganism and Judaism, which then just makes things really bad for them too. That's no longer Judaism, right? The first command is, I am your God, and there's no other gods beside me, right? So, in order to maintain ritual purity, oftentimes they had to reject anything that wasn't. So I say all this to show that this story kind of goes along a different route than we might expect. All right, so we've got Elimelech, and he is married to Naomi. Elimelech is married to Naomi. They have to go to Moab. They have to leave Israel. Remember, this is the time of the judges, right? So they're in Israel. They have to leave Israel for Moab. Oh man, my voice is going to be awful today. They have to leave Israel for Moab because of a famine. While they're there, both of their sons get married. So they have two sons. Oh, I'm scared. Alright, those are their two sons. I don't know if you really have to know them. They have two sons, and they both marry Moabite wives. Now, this is what we were just talking about, right? We have Israelites marrying Moabite wives. One of them marries a woman named Ruth. Hence the namesake of this book of the Bible. All right, we good so far? Over the course of their time in Moab, Elimelech dies, and the two sons die. They gone. That just leaves Naomi and her daughters-in-law. Now Naomi says, listen, there's nothing left for me in Moab. I'm going back home to Israel. To which the daughters-in-law say, all right, peace. Except for Ruth. Ruth says, let me go with you. I don't want to leave. Let me go with you. And she goes, well, you're not an Israelite, but if you want to come, go ahead and come with me. So Ruth and Naomi go back together, and they show up, and obviously, they're very poor. There's no one to provide for them. So they get to Israel, and they end up in the threshing field of a man named Boaz. Fantastic Old Testament name, Boaz. So they end up in basically a field of Boazes. And what we see is that they're picking the leftover produce in the field. This is according to the law of Israel that when you went through a field, so you have a field, and it's time to pick the field, you're only supposed to go over it once. You're not supposed to go over it a second time and pick up all the leftovers. The leftovers were meant for the poor. That those who were poor, who needed food to survive, they could go through and then they could have the rest of your field. You get everything you can the first time you go through, but don't go through a second time. That's for the poor. And so Naomi and Ruth are in Boaz's field picking through, and Boaz takes notice of Ruth, and Ruth takes notice of Boaz. And they kind of look at each other, and you see the spark in their eyes, right? And so after going back and forth a few times, they end up getting married. Not only do they get married, they have a son named Obed. Obed has a son named Jesse. Jesse has a son. Does anybody know who is the son of Jesse? Think about your Old Testament history. Who is the son of Jesse? Jesse is the father of David, the king. Whoa! Hold on there. Ruth is in the timeline of David, or the timeline, the genealogy of David the king. Not only that, who is also then she in the family? Who also is she in the genealogy of? Jesus. This is kind of a big deal, is it not? This is kind of like a really big deal. So, the story of Ruth provides an early sign of the expansion of the people of God to include all nations. It's an early indication that God not only wants his promise to be for the Jews, but he wants it to be for everybody. Now, this wouldn't occur until the covenant of who? We're looking at the 6 covenants. Which covenant opens it up to all people, all believers? Jesus, right? This doesn't happen until Jesus. But it's an early indication that God wants to do this. That God wants to open it up, that any person may be called to faith and salvation in Christ. So, so when we see genealogies, Ruth, Boaz are often included in that, which I think is kind of the coolest thing. And that's really the story of Ruth. So let's move on to what I think is actually my favorite of the Old Testament stories. And I think we're just going to read this start to finish and spend a little bit of time here. I think there's a lot of good stuff. I don't know if you'll ever get it anywhere else. So let's go to the book of Tobit. I'm going to push ahead to Tobit. You're probably going to want to use your table of contents again. So bump it ahead. All right, so we got 14 chapters here. It's not a super long story. Let's see, we've got until 9:05, so we'll probably spend the rest of the class period on Tobit and go from there. So I'm going to erase all this. Everyone good with the timeline here? Great. All right, so in the first two verses of Tobit, we see that this takes place during the time of the days of Shalmaneser. The king of the Assyrians was taken into captivity, which is south of Kadesh, Naphtali, Galilee, above Asher. What does that mean? That means the time frame of this is during the Assyrian exile. Not the Babylonian exile, the Assyrian exile. So we're talking about the tribes to the north, the northern tribes, the northern kingdom of Israel. Very good. Northern kingdom of Israel during the Assyrian exile. So the southern kingdom of Judah still exists, but the northern kingdom has been taken by Assyria. And so we're talking about that Tobit was also part of the Assyrian exile. In verse 3, I, Tobit, walked in the ways of truth and righteousness all the days of my life. Could you imagine starting a book about yourself like that? I walked in ways of truth and righteousness all the days of my life. Obviously, this is, what we call a novella. He's not writing an autobiography here. That's kind of funny. I always like how it starts. And I performed many acts of charity to my brethren and countrymen who went with me into the land of the Assyrians, to Nineveh. Now, when I was in my own country in the land of Israel, while I was still a young man, the whole tribe of Naphtali, my forefather, deserted the house of Jerusalem. This was the place which had been chosen from among all the tribes of Israel, where all the tribes should sacrifice, and where the temple of the dwelling of the Most High was consecrated and established for all generations forever. All the tribes that joined in apostasy used to sacrifice to the calf Baal, and so did the house of Naphtali, my forefather. All right, so we're talking about, we heard that name before, by the way? The calf Baal. Where did we hear that before?
Exodus?
Uh-huh. That would be the first time we saw that, right? See the golden calf. Was there another story that named Baal by name? A little louder? Yes, in Kings. What was the story? Do you remember? You're right, though. It's in the Kings.
Was it the talking donkey?
Not the talking donkey. No, close enough.
Was it the seer from Paul?
Oh, you're right. Both of you are right. That's a third. I totally forgot about that one. Yes, sorry. Both of you are correct. The talking donkey does include, he's a priest of Baal. That is correct. Balaam is a priest of Baal. Forgot about him. There's another story that involves Baal. It was one of my favorite Old Testament stories. It involves a prophet of the Lord.
Was it, so there's a prophet against a bunch of other prophets
Yes.
who were of another religion, and then they tried to prove which religion was right?
Yes. So who is the good prophet?
Elijah?
Elijah was the prophet against the 450 prophets of Baal. Exactly right. So we saw them go together, go at it, and Elijah was, of course, victorious. And so we're talking about the northern kingdom. One of the reasons that they fell was because they started worshiping the calf Baal. They fell into idolatry again. And Tobit's making that case very clear, that all the tribes joined in that apostasy. They turned away from God and started following the golden calf Baal, and that's why the Assyrians took over them. All the tribes joined in that apostasy and used to sacrifice to the calf Baal, and so did the house of Naphtali, my forefather. But I alone went often to Jerusalem for the feasts, as it is ordained for all Israel by an everlasting decree. Taking the first fruits and the tithes of the produce of the first shearings, I would give these to the priests, the sons of Aaron at the altar. Of all my produce, I would give a tenth to the sons of Levi, who ministered at Jerusalem. A second tenth I would sell, and I would go and spend the proceeds each year at Jerusalem. The third tenth I would give to those to whom it was my duty, as Deborah, my father's mother, had commanded me, for I was left an orphan by my father. When I became a man, I married Anna, a member of our family, and by her I became the father of Tobias. All right, so Tobit is married to Anna, and they have a son named Tobias. So keep Tobit and Tobias separate in your mind. I don't understand why they have to have names so similar to each other, but apparently they really like that. So, Tobit and Tobias. Tobias is the son. Most of the stories can actually center around Tobias, the son. Now, when I was carried away captive to Nineveh, so there's the Assyrian exile, right? Talking about the Assyrian exile. When I was carried away captive to Nineveh, all my brethren and my relatives ate the food of the Gentiles, but I kept myself from eating it, because I remembered God with all my heart. Then the Most High gave me favor and good appearance in the sight of Shalmaneser, and I was his buyer of provisions. So I used to go to Media, and once at Rages in Media, I left 10 talents of silver in trust with Gabael, the brother of Gabrias. But when Shalmaneser died, Sennacherib, his son, reigned in his place. And under him, the highways were unsafe, so that I could no longer go to Media. All right, so tell me a little bit about Tobit. At least, what is Tobit saying about himself? Yeah, he follows God's law like really, really well. Like he's the best. He's the best. Believe me, he's the best at following God's law. Right? That's basically what it sounds like. Right? I'm just the best at following God's law. And he's really honorable, and I'm like, man, that's the image we're supposed to get. This is a man who, against all odds, is continuing to fight for the people of Israel. He's continuing to fight for the way of life and the culture of Israel, even in the middle of deportation. All right, so the 10 talents of silver he left in a place called Media. This is going to be important later. He left 10 talents of silver, and he's going to eventually walk that back. In the days of Shalmaneser, I performed many acts of charity to my brethren. So it's continuing on about how good of a dude he is. I would give my bread to the hungry and my clothing to the naked. If I saw any one of my people dead and thrown out behind the wall of Nineveh, I would bury him. And if Sennacherib, the king, would put to death any who came fleeing from Judea, I would bury them secretly. For in his anger he put many to death. When the bodies were sought by the king, they were not found. Then one of the men of Nineveh went and informed the king about me that I was burying them. So I hid myself. When I learned that I was being searched for to be put to death, I left home in fear. Then all my property was confiscated, and nothing was left to me except my wife, Anna, and my son, Tobias. Okay. So we're also supposed to get this image of Sennacherib, who is an evil dude, right? He obviously put the northern kingdom into exile. He's an evil dude. He would kill people and then not bury them. Now, burying the dead for just about every culture is kind of an important thing, right? You want to respect the dead, those who have died, especially as we celebrate All Souls Day today, right? We want to respect the dead, honor the dead, and he would kill them and leave them out to be just fed on by the birds and the animals. A further humiliation after death. He wanted people to see their dead bodies. Tobit didn't like this, and he would secretly bury the dead and give them an honorable burial. So Sennacherib heard about this and wanted to kill him for it. He had to go into hiding, get everything taken from him. This is how much he wanted to follow God's law. It was to this level. But not 50 days passed before two of Sennacherib's sons killed him, and they fled to the mountains of Ararat. Then Esarhaddon, his son, reigned in his place, and he appointed Ahikar, the son of my brother Enael, over all the accounts of his kingdom and over the entire administration. Ahikar interceded for me, and I returned to Nineveh. Now Ahikar was cupbearer, keeper of the signet, and in charge of administration of the accounts. Is he an important guy? Yes. What did we say the cupbearer was? We've talked about the cupbearer before. An important guy. Yes. I mean, he has to be one of the most trusted people in the land, right? He has to be absolutely trusted with the king's life. So he was that. He was keeper of the signet and in charge of administration of accounts. Now, what it means to be in charge of the signet, we're talking about the signet ring, right? And it's got an impression that only the king has. So when the king mailed a letter, put his seal on it, he was the only one with the signet. So that everyone knew if they saw that image, it came right from the king. It came right from the king. So he could send mail. He could send orders in the name of the king with that signet ring. If he wanted to abuse that power, he absolutely could. This guy is trusted. This guy is important and powerful. And notice, that's the brother of Tobit. When I arrived home, and my wife Anna and my son Tobias were restored to me at the Feast of Pentecost, which is the sacred festival of the 7 weeks, a good dinner was prepared for me, and I sat down to eat. Upon seeing the abundance of food, I said to my son, "Go and bring whatever poor man of our brethren you may find among the exiles in Nineveh, who is mindful of the Lord, and ye shall eat together with me. So I will wait for you until you come back." So Tobias went out to look for some poor person and of our people. When he came back, he said, "Father," and I replied, "Here I am, my child." And he went on to say, "Look, Father, one of our own people has been murdered and thrown into the marketplace, and he now lies there strangled." So before I tasted anything, I sprang up and removed the body to a place of shelter until sunset, when I might bury it. When I returned, I washed myself and ate my food in sorrow. Then I remembered the prophecy of Amos, and we'll talk about Amos in the next section. How he said against Bethel, "Your feast shall be turned into mourning, and all your songs into lamentation." And I wept. All right, here's where the story gets interesting and gets kind of fun. When the sun had set, I went and dug a grave and buried the body. And my neighbors laughed at me and said, "He is still not afraid. He has already been hunted down and be put to death for doing this. And he ran away, yet here he is burying the dead again." On the same night after I, Tobit, returned from burying the dead, I went into my courtyard and slept by the wall of the courtyard. And my face was uncovered because of the heat. So he goes, sleeps outside. He's over by the wall. He sleeps with his face uncovered because of the heat. I did not know that there were sparrows on the wall, and their fresh droppings fell into my open eyes, and white films formed on my eyes. The birds literally pooped in his eye. Yup. And the film covered his eyes, and he became blind. This is the word of the Lord. I love this stuff. I went to the physicians to be healed, but the more they treated me with ointments, the more my vision was obscured by the white films until I became completely blind. For 4 years, I remained unable to see. All my kindred were sorry for me, and Adhikar took care of me for 2 years until he went to Elimaeus. Okay. So, all this good that God does for Tobit, or no, that Tobit does for God, right? Tobit's doing all these great things. Tobit is keeping the law. Tobit is going above and beyond to remain faithful to the Lord. And he could have said in this moment, thanks for repaying me this way. Right? You're repaying me, Lord, by letting birds poop in my eyes, and now I'm blind. Right? He could have at that moment turned around and said, done. That's not worth it. Maybe one of these Assyrian gods will treat me better than you. Of course, we know he doesn't do that, right? He remains faithful. Right. Then my wife Anna earned money at women's work. She used to send the product to the owners and they paid her wages. One day, the 7th of Dexterus, when she cut off a piece she had woven and sent it to the owners, they paid her full wages and they also gave her a kid. I'm not talking about like human kid, right? I think it's a small goat, just name the kid, right? Am I right, farmers? Any farmers in here? Anybody knows? Small goat, I believe, is a kid. We're not talking about a human child. When she returned it to me, it began to bleat. So I called her and said to her, "Where did you get the kid? It is not stolen, is it? Return it to the owners, for it is not right to eat what is stolen." She said it was given to me as a gift, in addition to my wages. But I did not believe her and told her to return it to the owners, and I blushed for her. Then she replied to me, "Where are your charities and your righteous deeds? You seem to know everything." Oof. Then in my grief I wept and prayed in anguish, saying, so I think we're seeing here is a little bit of frustration on Tobit's part, right? Tobit, that he can't provide for the family, that he can't work, that he's blind. A little bit of frustration comes out here. You can see it really taking a toll on the marriage a little bit in Tobit's own mind. Then in my grief I wept and prayed in anguish, saying, "Righteous are you, O Lord, and all your deeds are just. All your ways are mercy and truth, and you render true and righteous judgment forever. Now, O Lord, remember me and look favorably upon me. Do not punish me for my sins and for my unwitting offenses and those which my fathers committed before you. For we disobeyed your commandments, and you gave us over to plunder, captivity, and death. You made us the talk, the byword, and an object of reproach in all the nations among which you have dispersed us. And now your many judgments are true and exacting penalty for me, for my sins and for those of my fathers, because we did not keep your commandments. We did not walk in truth before you. And now deal with me according to your pleasure. Command my spirit to be taken up, that I may be released from this face of the earth and become dust. For it is better for me to die than to live, because I have heard false reproaches, and great is the sorrow within me. Command now that I now be released from my distress. Release me to go to the eternal abode, and do not, O Lord, turn your face away from me. For it is better for me to die than to see so much distress in my life and to listen to such insults." All right, so we see this clearly has taken its toll on Tobit. And he prays for death. Now, think of it like a comic book, right? Meanwhile, all the way over here on the other side of the world, on the same day at Ecbatana, Media, so now this is the place that we talked about earlier, right? Media. It's not a short journey. We've now completely shifted the setting. We're somewhere else now. On the same day at Ecbatana and Media, it also happened that Sarah, the daughter of Raguel, was reproached by her father's maids because she had been given to 7 husbands, and the evil demon Asmodeus had slain each of them before he had been with her as his wife. Oh yeah, let's talk about this for a moment. She had been married off 7 times. And so the marriage is consummated the night of the wedding, right? With the marital act. And each time before they have the marital act, the husband dies. Now, can you imagine the trauma that Sarah is going through at this point? 7 times this has happened. Now, this is going on the evil demon Asmodeus had slain each of them before he had been with her as his wife. So the maid said to her, "You're the one who kills your husbands," which I think is, at least all of us at some point would kind of be thinking, is it the demon or is she actually killing her husbands? "You are the one who killed your husbands. See, you already have had 7 and have had no benefit from any of them. Why do you beat us? Because your husbands are dead? Go with them. May we never see a son or daughter of yours." Yikes. On that day she was deeply grieved in spirit and wept. When she had gone up to her father's upper room, she intended to hang herself. But she thought it over and said, "Never shall they reproach my father, saying to him, 'You only had one beloved daughter, but she hanged herself because of her distress. And I shall bring this old age down in sorrow to the grave. It is better for me not to hang myself, but to pray to the Lord that I may die, and not listen to these reproaches anymore.' At that same time, with hands outstretched toward the window, she prayed and said, 'Blessed are you, O Lord, merciful God, and blessed is your holy and honored name forever. May all your works praise you forever. And now, O Lord, I have turned my eyes and my face toward you. Command that I be released from the earth and hear the reproach no more. You know, O Lord, that I am innocent of any sin with man, and that I did not stain my name or the name of my father in the land of my captivity. I am my father's only child, and he has no child to be his heir, no near kinsman or kinsman's son, for whom I should keep myself as wife. Already 7 husbands of mine are dead. Why should I live? But if it not be pleasing to you to take my life, command that respect be shown to me, and pity be taken upon me, that I may hear reproach no more." All right, so we see 2 people, very different situations, both pray for the same thing. And we see God is going to answer both of those prayers simultaneously. At the very moment the prayer of both was heard in the presence of the glory of the great God, Raphael was sent to heal the 2 sons of them. Raphael. So who is Raphael?
He's an archangel.
He is an archangel. So God sends the archangel Raphael to them. This is why we know his name, because of the Tobit of Raphael. So you see Raphael, the archangel, is being sent. Raphael was sent to heal the 2 of them, to scale away the white films of Tobit's eyes, and to give Sarah, the daughter of Raguel, in marriage to Tobias, the son of Tobit, and to bind Asmodeus, the evil demon, because Tobias was entitled to possess her. At that very moment, Tobit returned and entered his house, and Sarah, the daughter of Raguel, came down from her upper room. So we see that God is going to heal both at the same time. That the film is going to be healed from Tobit's eyes, and that Sarah is going to be given as a wife to his son Tobias. And we will see how that goes tomorrow. I guess 6 minutes, but this is a good stopping place. All right, how many chapters are this? 14? Easy. We'll finish that today. All right, how is the King's Project going? Good on the King's Project? Is anybody else finished? If you have finished, you're welcome to turn it in at any time. Remember, there's a test on Thursday. Then you have weekends to do the King's Project, and then after that, hey, did I say we're done yet? Thank you. Just one more thing. So we've got test on Thursday. King's Project is due on Monday, and on Monday, I'm going to announce the next project we will have, which will take the place of the 5th test. So it'll be the Prophets Project. So we're going to do a project based on the prophets. That's what will take us through the section of the prophets. And then, so those will be presentation style projects, which will be a little bit different. That will finish off our semester, and then we'll have a final exam, which will cover everything we've learned so far. Good on that? Any questions about any of that? So that's kind of the blueprint for the rest of the semester. Test on Thursday, King's Project due on Monday. Next project will be announced. Those projects will finish towards the end of the semester, the last week of the semester, and then we've got the final exam, which will be cumulative. cover everything we've done so far. But it'll be taken from all the study guides, so I'll make a new study guide based on all previous study guides, so it's nothing new. It's everything we've studied before. All right, now is work. Enjoy the rest of your day. Ah, yes.
Close our computer.
Let's see.